It's kick-off time. Thanks very much for coming, everyone. Of course, when we do these, Alice. This is also the first of these talks that I'm participating in. I like to hide behind the camera usually, so I apologise when standing and talking and stuff like that in advance. But it should be interesting because Alice and I have known each other for years and years and years, don't we? And we'll talk about that stuff, the kind of the origin story. It's, I think it could be more than that. I think it's closer to 20. Okay. Yeah, it's 20.
Yeah, we both lived in New York in 2000s, they say, right?
Yeah, they say that.
That's where we met. We met through a friend, Anoni, who at the time, well, it doesn't matter, Anoni.
Yeah.
There.
Up here in the corner.
And so we were introduced, and right around that same time, this work went out. It was presented at Participant Gallery, if anybody knows New York, in the Lower East Side. And John, did you go to the show?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So somehow we came together, and John said, "Why don't you bring it over to London? I have a little place on Hanway Street. It's similar. It's like a garret. It was like." How would you describe that?
It was a beautiful space, but up a dingy staircase. So there's such clearly a theme. It was kind of hard to find. People moaned that they couldn't find it, but when they found it, they always really loved it. And it was a lovely space.
It really was magical.
We sometimes paint the walls like this,
and the road was a hook or something, no?
It's a slight bend. It's an old Tudor street, actually. Yeah, it's just between Tottenham Court Road and Oxford Street.
I remember it well, yeah. And so I came over to London and we presented this work at that time, and then it just sort of had a life. Right then it just kind of went right into the world. I mean, John was able to find some magazine work in London, and then it went to Paris, and then it went a bunch to Toronto, and it just had like a whirlwind tour, and then kind of went to sleep.
Well, you've been working on it ever since then.
I haven't stopped, right. Yeah. So some of the, if you were to see the dates on these portraits, so do we need to even say what we're doing here?
Yes.
So, okay, good. So all of these portraits are friends of mine and also people in the extended community of the Lower East Side, of East Village, of, maybe we could go to West Village, John.
Yeah.
Downtown New York. Actually, there was a little bit of a moment in Brooklyn. So Joey's in Bushwick for a second there, and that was just, and also the spaces. So so they're portraits of artists of New York, and also of a queer demimonde, and then they're also portraits of these locations, of these rooms, of the sort of empty spaces that are very hard to find now. It's very difficult to find this kind of interior in my neighborhood.
How do you find them?
I don't hardly at all. Let's see, which is the most recent? So that one is that one's fairly new. Siobhan is a squatter, in one of the original squatters. Lives in Umbrella House on Avenue B, and 2nd Street. And Siobhan, we just used, the space that Siobhan is. So sometimes I'm working in the person's space because I had studios for a while. For example, that one is in Bushwick. That one is Avenue D and 9th Street, where the Lesbian Avengers had their parties, and I lived there. That was the first studio I had. It's Eileen Miles, the poet. And that's a studio I had on Bleecker Street, Paul Alexander. That's just a few years ago. That was the Yippie headquarters. Anybody knows of the Yippies? Jerry Rudin. And my first time I came to New York, went to New York. I guess we're not in New York right now. When I first went to New York in the early 80s, well, the first time by myself, let's just say, with a group of friends, we drove all night for the anti-nuclear big thing in Central Park. There was like 1 million people there, and we were 18. And we were taking Black Beauties, if anybody remembers those. We were just up all night and arrived in the morning, and no one knew. It was before cell phones and before the internet, so we hadn't made any arrangements. We're just going, right? And one of them said, I know a place we can go. I said, where? He said, the Yippie headquarters. So we landed at the Yippie headquarters, and of course they took us in, and we all went to Central Park and slept in the park and this and that. So that was actually my first place I landed in New York. And so it's kind of interesting. For a minute I had a studio in the Yippie headquarters.
Where did you come from?
Geez, I'm from Buffalo, New York. If that means anything too. It's sort of Niagara Falls-ish. Upstate New York.
Right. So
Yeah, so.
it's just a natural trajectory, sort of tractor beam
To New York.
To New York.
It's an 8-hour drive.
Yeah.
It's as natural as anybody who comes to New York. I think we all kind of find our way to New York if we want to be there, right? But no, there's not a lot of. Lately, there's more Buffalonians in New York. It's kind of annoying, actually, because they're all football fans. It's not that. I mean, it's that part of Buffalo. They're all in the bars, and they have big Bills parties and blah, blah, blah. But for me, I was a young queer, so for me to go to New York at that time was a different kind of. It was a pilgrimage, you know, to be in a cosmopolitan, in a big city with, and of course it was the AIDS crisis, and so there was so much. We had ACT UP Western New York, which was in Buffalo, so I was doing AIDS activism then and there.
Can you explain what ACT UP was doing?
So ACT UP is the grassroots political street action, anarchistic movement. I don't know what it's not quite. I guess it's an organization, but that would be maybe too formal. Direct action group responding to the AIDS crisis, and specifically in the U.S. toward, you know, the policies of the government, right, to try and get better medicines and drug treatment and push things through faster, because back then everything took forever to approve. People were dying so fast everywhere. So ACT UP was very frontline, you know, to political actions at the National Institute of Health, at the
everywhere.
Everywhere. We
Yeah.
shut down things, and St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Yeah.
This
But
is
it was
principally.
also to make the fight visible,
Yeah,
because it was
get more
so
funding, right?
invisible at that point. There was no funding for it. Yeah.
Because Reagan was really
Yeah.
against
Absolutely.
the whole idea of putting funding research.
But yeah, so it was very, very political at that moment. And so if you guys have had a chance, and if you hadn't after this, go look at the slideshow that's in the next room, because that's all from the 90s. And that's kind of more focused on the nightlife of that period in New York, but because I worked in nightclubs, but also because for me, and I was saying to Jane, who's my friend also from New York, but now we live in England somewhere.
Somewhere.
Sorry, Jane. I know you told me, but Jane I've known for decades, and so the point being that during the day we were protesting, and we were really, you know, very united in a way, especially as queer community. I mean, it was everyone, you know. Sometimes it can be different for the nightclubs. You have the gay men and the lesbian nightclub, this and that. But back then there was a lot more overlap and interaction. And so so at night the parties were amazing, because we were so.
I think you told me. I remember you told me once that by day things were so grim, you had to have a release at night.
It was very heightened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And funerals, a lot of funerals, a lot of visits to the hospital, a lot of caretaking in the home, a lot of friends who were really not doing well. And so it seems like the parties were extra. I don't know if, you know, that's makes sense, but the camaraderie was so strong in a way. And we were very, let's see, desperate might not be the right word, but fierce. Very fierce. The energy was strong. So the slideshow starts with the Clit Club where I worked, my first job in New York. As my father liked to say, "You still checking hats at the Clit Club?"
Which was actually, just to bring into the work here, that was started by somebody here.
Oh, okay. So
in the,
this person
Anfield.
on the upper right is now goes by the name Jaguar Mary, and they were one of two that started that night. It was primarily women of color, definitely, who started it, and also who were running it, and also who were there. And one of the first places I lived in New York was in a loft with, we say JM, Jaguar Mary JM, who's a filmmaker, and so we became friends, and she gave me a job checking coats. And so I was in the basement it was in the meatpacking district, which really back then was meat.
Mm.
There were butchers and sex workers.
It's on the west side, isn't it?
On the
Which is
west side,
straight
yeah. Way
by
over.
where the piers used to be.
Thank you.
West side.
Yeah, a lot of trans sex workers. It was a night, you know, a lot going on at night, and this club was down so you go down, or you go, I guess you go, now it's down on Furstenberg across the street. It's all cleaned up and commercial and very high end. But back then it was like a donut shop that was open, or some, you know, the trucks would come in with the meat at 4 in the morning as you're coming out of the club. The butchers were arriving with these big trucks of, so it was kind of an interesting time also just to be in the city, just because things were still very sort of organic in a way. It was like real people working and doing things, as opposed to now a lot of tourists. The Clit Club. So I was working there, and I was in the basement. That's where the code check was. And I didn't know, apparently found out later, there was a no camera rule. So I have like the only pictures of the Clit Club by chance. And I of course wish I had done more, but I mostly was limited to that because I couldn't leave. I mean, that was my job, to watch your coat.
Mm.
So I pretty much stayed in that place. So the pictures are women, mostly women who came to see me or sat with me, or there was also kind of a thing that was like the I say basement, but it was a long corridor, so that's where all the sex and drugs and, you know, that's where you went if you wanted to kind of go behind the scenes of the club. So I also got some of the more colorful people. The wildest one. Well, Dee Finley just died. Dee Finley died this week. I have a portrait of Deanna if I'd known. I mean, John and I were saying yesterday, now we have to do the people who have ascended show, like how many of these people are there? But Dee was somebody I met at the Clit Club. It was wild. Showed me how to work a switchblade the first night, you know, just in case, leaving the club at night, you needed it.
You never know.
John, can you help me characterize that moment?
Well, I got sober a little bit earlier, so I was not really so involved in going.
Well, I mean, that period of New York.
Well, it was still gritty. I mean, I moved there in '81, and it was very gritty then. You know, you couldn't go over. I mean, I lived in the west side. You couldn't really go over to like A and B and C.
Yeah, Alphabet City.
Yeah, really off limits. But I mean, it was pre everybody knowing what was going on everywhere, so it was very kind of community. You had all the artists kept together, and then the nightlife. So it was much more intimate than it is now, say, for example. And it was very exciting because you could kind of run wild in a way, because there was very little, you know, people didn't know what was going on really, so.
Well, we had the Village Voice, so you pick up the Village Voice once a week, and it had all the
Free newspaper,
listings.
wasn't it? Free newspaper.
Free newspaper. It had journalism as well,
Yeah.
art reviews, this and that, but it also listed the parties, if you were good enough to get your party listed in there, figured out. But if you really paid attention, you could see every night of the week, there were multiple parties. And most of them, for me anyway, the ones I went to, gravitated to, had a lot of performance, live performance, and whether it's music or some sort of madcap theater, sort of weird.
Did you use the area club?
Yeah.
I didn't go, but she would have, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Madcap
more my
performance
son,
there,
yeah. But also the Pyramid Club, which of course was the first one where crazy drag queen scenes, and the first week I moved there actually, somebody took me to the Pyramid Club, and there was a drag queen in a pink suit reenacting the shooting of JFK, and I thought, oh my God, where am I?
Well, so Taboo.
Yeah.
Taboo would be one of the greats of the Pyramid. Also, a great painter, Stephen Tashin. You might see, I'm sure, somewhere in London in his work. I mean, but also Wigstock and everywhere. Taboo's performed, I think, on every stage. Formica, Mistress Formica is up on the start of that stool. And so she started Squeezebox, which is another club on the west side, and also did Wigstock. Was one of the first to do Wigstock. Agosto Machado, all the way back to the Warhol Factory, and also lives on 3rd Street, and still performs at La Mama and Theater for the New City and different. With Taboo, the two of them together. I was like, John, why do all the queens have to sit down? I was looking, I was like, what's up with that? They're tired, they've been working so hard.
So what's the process, Alice, the shooting process for you? First of all, how do you know who's next up?
Well, I don't know who's next up. It has something to do with just who's sort of in my orbit at that moment, and where do I have a space that I can use. And sometimes I've had like physical studios. Which one? Well, the one Eileen's in I had that for like a year. So it has something to do with that. And like for Chrissy was living with me. Chrissy went off to join the circus in San Francisco and lived in porn theaters, slept in porn theaters for months just to make the transition to the circus. And I just talked to him the other day. Sort of just, it's very, I'm like a windflower, you know, it's just sort of like wherever it lands, then I don't have a very exacting process. But the parameters for making the actual picture I do have, so they're all daylight studios, with one exception, Sharon. But all daylight, they are 4x5 cameras, so it's a view camera, black and white film tri-X. I only take 8 frames, that's it. And full figure, mostly, there's an exception, Annie, but mostly always full figure. The artists really style themselves for the most part. I mean, it's really meant to be a document of the artist as they present. I mean, there might be a bit of back and forth, like with Taboo, for example. That one, so that's Taboo's house, that's his apartment where he's lived at Mildred on 5th Street since the 80s. And I went there and it was full of his paintings and all his everything. And I said, just give me a minute, would you? I emptied the room. I pushed all of that stuff aside. And I put that little, as Anoni likes to say, is that an O'Malleyism? I said, yes, it is. Yeah, it's that little thing I put in. That was my set. Although he painted the top there. Originally he painted it. So then I said, okay, what are you going to wear? Because he has so many clothes, he's always performing in this and that. So he just bought that Yves Saint Laurent dress. I don't know where he got it. And so he had that. He knew he wanted to wear that. Okay, come on out. Plus I had to wear him down because his mind is always going a million miles an hour. So luckily this took a long time. So it's sort of like, bring it down. And so, okay, here we are. And then he had different hats. In fact, there is one where he has like a, what do you call it? Like with a brim and it's black and it goes, top hat. He has a top hat in one and he has like this Turkish metallic one. You haven't seen the outtakes.
I don't think so. No.
And I only have 8 shots, you guys. So we went through a few different versions of this. And then finally at the very end, I looked over and I saw that. I said, what is that fur hat? And he said, oh, I just picked that up at a thrift store this morning. I said, well, could you put it on for a minute? That's the one I liked. So who knows? And so sometimes it's a little back and forth with me in terms of people might bring more than one. Paul Alexander he started in jeans and a white shirt at the beginning. And so as we go through 8, we get to 7. Now I have one more, and often they'll be like, oh, I have something. Do you mind? And then the real reveal comes on number 8. They're like, the real thing they wanted all along.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting psychologically what, so my friend Agosto came, and I know him as just an incredible, just always wearing something beautiful, right? And I had that studio for one day in Tribeca as part of a commercial job. I had rented it, so I said, oh, I got 24 hours in this place, what can I do? Hello, Agosto, would you be available today? Could we do your portrait? Because usually I already have told people I want to do a portrait. So it's already sort of in the air. So then when there's an opening, it's like, could you come today? And Agosto said, sure, I'll come down. I said, great. So I went downstairs and I opened the door. And there he is with his just jeans and a t-shirt. Didn't want to express disappointment, but a little bit, it's like the great Agosto Machado is here in jeans and a t-shirt. Okay, come on upstairs. So we go up, and I said, well, I'm ready for you. I'd already worked out the light and the set and everything. It was all ready. I said, I'm ready for you, Agosto. Would you just take a seat? I said, oh, I have to change. And I said, but you didn't bring, he had nothing. He had a little tiny fanny pack this big. I said, but where are your clothes? And he opened the fanny pack and he just pulled out this, what do you call that? From India, what do you call it?
Sorry.
No, it's just one piece of fabric.
Oh,
chiffon.
But then, what do you call it?
Chiffon?
Is it chiffon?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard
Okay.
to find. Something like this.
Somebody must know somewhere. It is maybe chiffon, yeah.
Not good at telling.
It was so compact. And he just kept pulling it out and out and out and out and out. And then he just wrapped it, and it's one piece of fabric with 2 colors, and that was it. And he sat down, and I mean that's a great model. I hate to say model because he's not really a model, but that's a great collaborator. And I think that's also part of the process. If you're asking me about the process, so it's also an exchange. It's not. I'm there to document, I'm there to sort of make it work in a space, but each one of these people, of course, is already a creative, this is who they are. So I'm not in any way directing that, not much. I mean, Eileen got a prop, most people don't get a prop, but Eileen wanted the Diet Coke.
Fair enough.
Eileen drinks a lot of Diet Coke. I said, do you mind if I sell it to Diet Coke? No, I'm kidding. I haven't sold these, but in that way, they're not commercial. I don't think anything has ever been, no, they've never been in any sort of commercial context. Stormy Delivery, anybody? How's your queer history? In the corner? Go ahead. Do you know who she is? Oh, I thought you were nodding like you knew who she is. Does anybody know who Stormy is? Ah, interesting.
Right. Tell us about Stormy.
The puncher around the world. Well, she is supposedly, and she said to herself, she threw the first punch at a police officer at the Stonewall riots. And she also worked the door at the Cubbyhole and other lesbian nightclubs, lesbian bars. And this is in the Chelsea Hotel, where she lived for 35 years.
She has an interesting backstory as well, doesn't she? She's a performer.
Yeah,
Like a lounge performer. In the 40s, right?
yeah. The Jukebox Review, which was a traveling drag ensemble, mostly in the US, but they came over somewhere here too. And they were mostly drag queens. It was all drag queens, including some of the greats like I can't remember, not Jimmy Camici, but someone has to Google that. But there were some legends that were in that, and then Stormy was the only drag king. And she sang beautifully. And they performed like at the Apollo and all kinds of, who's in it? Okay, we'll have to get back to you on that. Like Betty Bourne, I don't know, my history's right now not so good, but it was early, so in like the 60s and maybe even before the 50s, when there were not too many drag shows. It would have been, they were an anomaly. So yes, she's a singer.
Again, ascended, right?
Yeah.
She's upstairs, not literally.
And if you look carefully, actually I have another picture of this day from close up. She has a black eye. She's a big black eye. And I asked her, I said, Stormy, what happened to you last? Because I had made the arrangement to come that day. The day before, I arranged, I'll be back tomorrow. Can we do your portrait? Yes, okay. To come back, black eye. Stormy, what happened? She was out the night before, walking the streets of the West Village, because she always liked to escort young women home from the bar. Like she'd try and, just kind of be a, I don't want to say guardian angel because I hate that, but she was always watching out. And she said she got into a fight on the street. She was 80-something.
Yeah.
And she said she always told me she had a pistol in her sock. I don't know. I didn't look. Possible. But she comes out of an era when it really was dangerous at night to walk the streets of the West Village or Chelsea, and so it wasn't even, I don't think she was exaggerating that she really did see that as part of her role in the community was to be a sort of a security. Anybody else have one or somebody they want to know about or anything that speaks to you?
Who's that in the corner, right?
Yeah, he's
It's
having
like
a
Claire's
corner.
asking me who's
Anoni.
Anoni.
You might know Anoni as a singer. Anoni and the Johnsons. Also Anthony and the Johnsons.
Yeah. Okay.
Also one of the first to produce this work. So Anoni was the vision that said, Because this work I was making all along, it since started in 2000. And I just did it because I just wanted to. I guess I don't know why I did it, just did it. My friend had given me the camera, and I don't know, it was just impulsive. And I was working for lawyers at the time. I was working for corporate lawyers by day. And I remember the phone rang one day at work, and I was in Midtown in a skyscraper, just hated it. But I thank you to the lawyers, because actually they gave me all the time, I mean not time, but you know, health insurance and stuff. So the phone rang and they said, Alice, it's for you. I said, who's calling me in the middle of the day, you know? Pick it up, and it's a noni. I said, is everything okay? And she said, Allie, when you die, could you leave your photographs to me so I can do something with them? I said, well, while you're waiting for me to die, go ahead. And so then she called Leah, who I do have a portrait of Leah, but it's not in this show. Leah from Participant. And then Participant presented the work. And did you publish or no? No. Anyway, so then it just started off into the world. But Anoni was the first to say, let's do this.
That was 2007, was it? I think 2008.
Yeah. And then I kind of went to sleep for a while, and just other things were going on. And then more recently, the work has come forward again. And maybe it's partly because it's aged a little bit, and also I keep making it. Some of these are new. But also I think it's hard to say why things just come forward, but.
Well, there's an impetus, I think, to document these people while they're here.
Well, it speaks also, I mean, it's sort of about the people, but it's also, to me, it's about a community. It's about the way that it's a sort of a pre-cell phone. Like now everybody has those pictures in the slideshow. Wouldn't be so interesting if everybody had a cell phone at the time. Yeah. So it speaks to a moment when we sort of did things slowly and quietly and behind the scenes and as friends, and just because we want to. It's weird. Yeah.
Did you run with other photographers when you were first in New York, like in the early 90s, or were you mostly amongst painters, or like what was your creative group that you were in?
I don't know about the photographers, but I mean, I teach at the International Center of Photography, so I do have sort of a built-in community of relationships and photography.
I mean, did you know Alan?
I love Alan, yes.
Yeah.
I've known Alan a long time.
It's Alan Frame.
Yeah, Alan Frame. And Alan was also early supporter of the work. No, I think I was more with the performers. I think I just loved that, Black Lips was, so Anoni founded this group, a troupe called Black Lips, which actually just had a big retrospective thing at Participant, and there's a book, a 500-page book about it. And that was this crazy, wild troupe of performers who went on at 1 a.m. at the Pyramid Club, 1 a.m. on a Monday. And it was always packed. And they would just get the script, one person would write a script, and they would get the script maybe just within the day of the performance. And they were all very talented, improvisational, also trans and also queer and also everything, performers and drag. James Marchant. And so that was, I went to Black Lips, and that was for me like the pinnacle of just what I came to New York for. Just so alive and creative and irreverent and talented, and it's political. And so from there, I met and just kept going. It was like Little Annie was part of Black Lips. Baby Joey was ever on stage, but Baby Joey would have been in the house.
Who's Baby Joey?
Baby Joey, Joey Gabriel.
She's in the middle there, isn't she?
Yeah, well, just a great muse to so many photographers and artists and Van Golden, of course,
Yeah.
to see many
She's
years
one
of
those
relationship.
pictures,
Yeah. Was Van's studio assistant.
For about a day.
Oh,
No, it was about one day. I mean,
really makes it sound like it was years.
yeah, there's a great story of this because I was running the studio and we thought Joey needed some work.
Joey did need some work, yeah.
Joey needed some work and she was really, really late one day, like super, super late. Maybe the first day actually. And she'd been up in the Bronx, I think, picking up some methadone actually. And to get downtown as quick as possible, she hitched a ride in a dump truck. She stepped out of the dump truck. Thanks, boys. And out she came, like immaculate as always.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, always put together.
Yeah, always fabulous. It's interesting that she's so
It's scaled down. a
yeah,
little.
it's going
Yeah,
this one.
I know. But it's almost like Nadar. Do you remember Nadar's clowns? And it's sort of, I think that's very deliberate.
Yeah.
The stockings with
Yeah.
the tunic.
Right.
But you're right, she could go completely. I mean, Marie Antoinette was,
Yeah.
and she also speaks 7 languages and like.
Expert in 15th century Italian painting.
Yeah, and left home at like 12.
Yeah.
And like traveled around.
She would fly back and forth across the Atlantic by Concorde. Because she was, I think, let's say she had special skills and they were in demand. So she would travel like that. Yeah, so it's quite something.
Really traveled the world,
Yeah, brilliant.
and such a great inspiration for so many artists. And
Yeah.
an artist herself, beautiful illustrator. Have you ever seen her drawings?
Incredible drawings and
Yeah.
beautiful writing in it as well.
Yeah, 1 in a million. So that's baby Joey, and I can't remember how she came up. Paul Alexander from Mother, the nightclub Jackie 60, great, just nightlife denizen, and also playwright. So, Paul. So this play was produced at the Jean Frankel a couple of years ago. Sorry to be stripping, but Trinkets. And Paul wrote it, and it's about, get this, the trans sex workers in the meatpacking district in the 90s, and this club called Trinkets, where they all come in. It's kind of like Cheers or whatever. They all know each other, and they perform. Kevin Aviance performs, and it ran 2 times or 3 at the Jean Frankel. So that's Paul's play, and
So
then
that's a theatre run by another great
Gail
photographer, actually, Gail Thacker.
Thacker, yeah. And the next one is Jack Waters, who is a filmmaker. He started one of the founders of ABC No Rio.
What's ABC No Rio?
Well, what is it now? It's in exile, but it is a nonprofit art space, and, but very DIY. There's a printing center, was in silk screen, and the dark room, but it was started as a punk. I mean, really.
It was one of the first sort of storefront gallery spaces in East Village, wasn't it?
Lower East Side,
I think they said it was a centre for opposition. That's how they termed it.
Yeah, on a Saturday afternoon in the courtyard, there would be a hardcore punk show, just disrupting the whole neighborhood for miles. And they do bread nut bombs, they do zine, everything. But unfortunately, the building's torn down, so they still have to get.
I think
a
they're
building.
trying to find a new space. There's somehow
Yeah,
it's
they're
still
raising
hanging
money.
on.
Getting money. Eileen Miles is a poet, and many of you would know them as a writer, an author.
Chelsea
Great
Ghost.
thinker, yeah. Close friend, also a political activist. So we were involved in trying to save the trees of Lower East Side the last few years.
Yeah, can you tell us quickly about that? Because you were very involved in that. I know it's a tough one to talk about, but
Well, they destroyed 500 at least.
about
Yeah, well, not just 500 trees. It is the largest green space below Central Park in Manhattan. It's one of the last remaining forests. And the city decided that they wanted to do a big forget it. Let's just say we didn't agree, obviously. So we spent 2 years fighting a good fight, John. And Eileen is a big part of that. And now doing Palestinian liberation work. And Vita, my godchild, also a great muse to so many artists, including myself, and now works as an archivist at the Studio Museum of Harlem. But that was a fashion shoot. Oh, these are two of the people I worked with in the activism with the trees. So Emily Johnson is a dancer, and Ivy is a sculptor, installation artist, and they just had that baby. That baby was 2 days after this picture was. This picture was done in August of this year. And it was my friend's yard on 3rd Street, and my friend was out of town, and she wanted me to check on her apartment. Everything's fine. So we did it just quick. Yeah, and the baby was 2 days later. And they're both great activists too. I don't know who else is here. Can't see. And there's some more in the hallway. My friend Sharon, whose shirt I have on, and she's in the hallway. She just also ascended. So it's been quite a year.
There's just great, fantastic stories about everybody. Really, it's like a collection of stories.
And a lot of these people work together as well. So there's all these relationships. Even like we used to joke, "Oh, you can't put that one next to that one because they've had a falling out." You know.
Well, co-curation.
Like a dinner party, you've got to make sure it's
There's
all.
a question.
Yeah. Hi.
Can I ask you about Genesis?
Sure.
To know more about the picture.
No. Genesis.
Related to Genesis.
You know Genesis?
Not in person.
Oh,
But I know.
yeah. Right, so obviously British, right? And Robin Gristle, they were married and they merged with their wife into one person, like they both got the same plastic surgery, like to be identical, or somewhat identical. That picture, actually, we are in the rafters of the Angel Orange building, which is a big Orthodox synagogue church, I'm not sure. And it's in the Lower East Side. It's a really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful building. And I did a trade with the guy who runs it, Angel Orange, and I did a trade. I photographed his paintings. And he was like, "Well, I don't have any money to pay you," or something like crazy. They always say that. I said, "That's okay, because you have sort of garret, and I've seen the light up there because there's these beautiful windows that come in." I said, "Tell you what, we'll trade. I would like to, because you would not believe how much a studio costs. You pay $1,000 a day easy for a studio. I mean, it wouldn't even look like that, but." So again, I always look for those kind of markers of the original interior. If you can see, if you can find the woodwork, if you can find the little bit of window something, or the hallway, you know, I like to see the spaces we were in. So anyway, that was the big trade. Actually did 2 pictures. So, I mean, another person. But, so we went, but unfortunately it makes me a little sad because Genesis was under treatment for cancer at that time, so she was very tired that day. But, you know what? She showed up and we did it, so I'm happy we did. And that's a very weird set. That's me sort of just trying to block out some of the background with whatever was available. I didn't really have a proper. The sets sometimes I make, or I do make, so they're just a little bit of, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. The one with Jack Waters is so different because that's an apartment on 2nd Street. So he lives on 2nd Street with his boyfriend or husband, I don't know, Peter Kramer. And I wanted to do their picture, and I first did it in the garden. And and they weren't happy. It's very rare that that happens, but sometimes I get some pushback from the people, like, no, that wasn't right. Okay, well, what do you wanna do? And they said, well, there's this apartment above us that's been empty since the 80s, and it used to be used as a drug, you know, where they put the basket down out the window and you put the money in, and then they bring the basket up, and then they put the drugs and goods down, whatever that's called. I don't know, I forgot the language for that. But it was used for that, and for some reason it never been, for some reason the landlord had never renovated it, which most spots now, they just come in and you know, just tear everything and just put up white, you know, it's just boring. The way they redo the apartments, they all look the same now, you know. So they said, we have a key to that space upstairs. We think you should use that. So again, great collaborators. So of course, I would do that. So I came over with my camera, and that's how that, so that one is completely off the charts of New York realness.
It's a very timeless picture though as well, isn't it?
Well, the refrigerator, that's from like the 1950s. You know, who has that? So sometimes you get that kind of thing going on, but mostly, or I have to just use like outdoor spaces now.
And the picture of Jean.
Oh, Jean Fedorko.
Yeah.
Hi, Jean, our friend Jean.
We couldn't get Jean in, could we?
We
We
couldn't
tried.
fit 'em in.
Yeah, there's Jean.
That's also a new one, yeah.
But that's also more unusual because it's so full of his stuff.
Right, yeah, this is more symbolic of Jean, but it's hard because Jean loves this loft, and he has lived there since the 70s.
Yeah.
And so he really wanted to do it there. That's fine. You know, I don't care anymore either. I just work here, you know? Somebody tells me they really want to do something, then that's right. I mean, unless it goes against, but you're right, this has a lot more signifiers.
Yeah.
It's a little different portrait. Yeah, usually I try and take them out of their stuff. Hi.
Hiya. I was just wondering, in terms of like, posing is the wrong word, but how they move their body when you're taking pictures, like would you direct them in any way or just kind of let them do what they wanted?
Yeah, well, they are pretty much posed. And that would be sort of almost a reference to sort of art historical, you know, these are speaking to the history of photography, and that they're a bit corny, you know, they're a little bit formal. And also a lot of times slow shutter, so it might be half a second. So they really do need to sit still, you know. But it again, the pose sort of comes from, I mean, just like the wardrobe, this is kind of how these people are in the world, you know, like, or some of them also are somewhat good with the camera, like Joey. Like Joey would know her angles or how she wants her architecture of her body. A lot of people want to sit down. The older we get, the more they want to sit down.
Dr. Julia, like this, in terms of thinking about the expression at the moment of
Dr.
taking
Julia
the
up
pictures,
there,
so
but
okay.
I love Dr. Julia. So she was also a great muse to so many, and world-renowned mathematician. Like her papers are taught at Yale and set theory. And trans and actually intersex, but whatever you want to think about it.
Now this one is
Japanese.
slightly different. This was actually done for.
That was a magazine shoot, so that one John, I think that was one of the ones.
I think for Pop magazine.
Pop magazine.
Yeah.
And it's Hader Ackerman is the designer. He's Lebanese, and so the clothes came in. Of course, I cast my friends because that's what I do, and that's I think partly what they were looking for when they hired me. So, and we did have a stylist on set. It's true, but the clothes came in at size like 0, and my friends were just real people. They weren't like Dr. Julia was not a size 0. There's not anything wrong with that. She just had a real body, and was probably 60 something there too. So we just sort of squeezed her into the Hader Ackerman 0. I don't know how the Hader Ackerman thought about it when it came out. Like, is that how he visioned? But I'm not trying to be bad. Am I going to get canceled? But no, because that's, I mean, we loved it. We actually loved it. Of course, let's do what we want with these clothes, you know. And she loved it too. And so I probably did in that one poser, I'm guessing. Just because it's so deliberate, you know, it's not a normal, it doesn't feel natural. The fact that she's in this chair, I've got the light and she's looking out, so maybe I was a little bit more self-conscious because it was a magazine shoot and I was maybe trying to make it a bit more artificial, or, you know, for fashion, bring it to a more sort of hyper-conscious kind of picture making.
Can I ask, do you ever re-photograph people? Or what, once you've captured them and their story, they done for you? Or have you ever revisited?
Well, there's a couple that they were either flops, meaning I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
In one case, okay, the picture I loved, and it was going all the way to the museum, the PS1. It was like already printed, large. Imagine you might have, I don't know if you had Marty. But anyway, beautiful. I mean, Marty was part of Black Lips. Marty's like bleached blonde, bottle blonde, lipstick, tight Marilyn Monroe dress, gorgeous. I'm sorry if you're watching this, Marty, but I was going to the framer, and I told everybody. I think I'd already told them, but somehow she called me and said, "I just want to know which picture are you using?" And I said, "Well, this one here." Oh, no. I said, why? She said, my ass is so big. Nobody noticed that except for you, and also, what's wrong with big ass? Anyway, so I had to pull it. I did. I didn't have to, but I decided I'd take it out. We did another shoot. This is like literally like showtime, John. We did another shoot. We sat down together. Are you okay with, how about this one? Okay, yeah, I love this one. Back to the printer, cost not, my bill. And then to the framer, and then she's happy. So it also, that's part of my ethic also, just in terms of working, I'm a little bit too, maybe.
So you want them to be happy?
Well, to a degree. I also sometimes just don't agree.
Yeah.
It depends. If it's a real deal breaker, of course.
But those two shots of Marty are very similar though. It's just a pose change.
Yeah. Same dress.
So you have to go
Same
back
dress.
Like
Same.
exactly the same pretty much. A little less ass, that's it. Right? That's it.
And I still can't remember which is the one that we like and which, because I printed them
They're both
both.
great.
They're both big. I still can't figure out which one she liked and didn't like. So I'm sure I've presented the wrong one again. I don't know anymore. And nor does she care anymore. Now, fast forward 10 years, of course, we all look great. I look at the one out front, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, so cute.
It's a portrait.
So cute, Alice. I think we all look great 10 years ago. Like there was a big thing on Facebook, right, last week where everybody's posting 21. Everybody looks good at 21. If you didn't look good at 21, something was wrong. It was an easy one, but so I think that's it. Was there one more question? Somebody feel like I had? No.
I was kind of interested when you were talking earlier about, you know, your community and there's definitely that collaboration when you're in the moment, but also in terms of how or whether people would suggest to you who to take a picture of, and if any of the people in here ever came to you and said, would you take my picture, or was it always your invitation?
I have had a few people ask me to take a picture.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, when you were talking earlier about that real moment when there was you were talking about lots of caregiving and looking after people and people
Yeah.
unwell, and were there moments when, as a group of friends, someone would suggest that you take a picture of someone? Or?
Before they die. It does come up. But that's not a motivation for me. No, I think first of all, they generally, even Genesis was not well. I don't think most people who are ill want, but it hasn't occurred to me I should have taken that picture because now they've died. Yes, that does come up for me often.
Or even aside of that, has anyone asked you to take a picture and they've landed as a final picture?
No.
They're all yours.
Maybe. I'll think about it. Maybe it's possible. Yeah. I'm not going to be sure about that answer yet.
Sure.
But I have had a few people ask me and I just didn't do it because the energy wasn't there. But I've also been commissioned, so sort of what happened also is like I did I did shoots for New York Times, like long fashion shoots, like 10 days. It was crazy. Back when they still had budgets. Vogue, I shot Pop, and a bunch of indie magazines. And it was really fun because suddenly now they just wanted me to do the same thing here. But suddenly there was catering and hair and makeup and wardrobe and armed guards for the jewelry. Armed guards. We had 6 armed guards one day. I was like, this is too much.
6.
Yeah, because each company has to send their own one. And
Can I just leap in? I do remember doing a shoot with Joey, and we had like $500,000 worth of diamonds.
yeah.
And the guy was just standing there with his gun out, basically. So I was like, oh shoot, it was mad. It was like, who's gonna?
No, so we had the armed guards because I also used Joey's studio loft as a studio for for that shoot, and the armed guard was there from what do you call it? Not Tiffany. What's the other one? Harry Winston, and he was a Vietnam vet, and we're sitting around shooting the shit. I said, all right, let me ask you something. I said, Joe, if I were to pick up that Harry Winston and walk out the door with it, were you gonna shoot me? He said, no. He said, we're not allowed to shoot indoors. He said, we have to wait till you get out on the street.
Then we can shoot the hell out of you.
I said, you wouldn't you? And he said, well, probably, yeah. But, so, they're there for insurance. But anyway, so we shot a lot in the Chelsea Hotel and this and that.
Up on the roof.
Yeah, and they gave me like models, real models, like Freya, who was like #2 in the world at the time, and they were like, you photographed Freya today. I'm like, what? And movie stars came in, Sally Hawkins was there, and all the movie stars. And it was so weird and different, it was hard to do. So that's sort of an example. Did somebody ask you to photograph somebody that you weren't going to? Yes. And it was harder. It was harder because the energy wasn't, a lot of what this is about is the relationship.
Yeah.
This is about the intimacy and about the history of the friendship and about this sort of game that we're playing as artists, that we're exchanging this thing and we're making something together. But whereas when I'm on a commercial shoot, they're just walking in the door and like, what's her name? Boys Don't Cry.
The Cure.
Huh?
The band The Cure.
Oh.
Whatever
Hillary Swank. She came in and she had like 10 minutes. Like she was going to be on Good Morning America and she had just come from this blah blah blah. She was on a press cycle. So she had like 10 minutes with me. That's not how I work. This takes forever. This magic doesn't happen in 10 minutes. Kidding. But it was a very different process.
Did you get shot?
I hate it.
Did you?
But, I mean, she was fine. She was fine, but it has nothing. no life. I stopped doing it after a while. I was like, well, partly they stopped doing it after a while. They were like, Alice, this is so expensive, this thing you're doing. It's like film and takes forever, and you know, it wasn't like.
Deep in the depths of the archive, there's some beautiful, highly saturated colour work. Tell us about that.
Okay, so you were asking if I had any inspiration, maybe. So definitely. So when I came to New York, the Boston School was very much. That's what I saw. That was the first kind of art that, or photo that.
Who was that?
So Nan Golden. So that's the Cibachrome. That's actually where that period of, for me, I started shooting Cibachrome because Nan did. But then I soon was a student of David Armstrong and a teaching assistant, and so, and David and Nan they were close friends and worked in parallel to each other with a lot of the same people that they photographed in French Circle. So really I'm more in the David Armstrong lineage, I think, if I were to say, and Peter Hujar, of course, and sort of, because mine are much more formal and even more formal than David, I would say, in that they're super, like, there's an appointment, there's a studio, there's a large format camera, there's certain really tight kind of structure that even though they look maybe a little bit loose, but the actual making of them requires that kind of blocking. And like they're not by accident. Nobody accidentally walks into this space with a 4x5 and yeah. Whereas Nan and David were maybe more in, you know, in the bedroom, in the car, in, you know, the nightclub, in locations that maybe were more authentic in a sense. But certainly both of them and that whole school of photography, of working with friends as an inspiration, yeah. And as a document. I mean, this is also just at the heels of the AIDS crisis, so we also were hyper aware of, as young people, losing our friends, you know, which is maybe still sort of true. Do you guys have like the opioid crisis and all that? Not so much.
Not so much. The people are still
There's a
dying.
little bit of a parallel happening right now in the United States with young people just dying. But I don't know how it, maybe it feels different, I don't know. With us, there was an illness. There was somewhat of an illness that went in, and sort of a demographic that was really hit hard. So I think it made me and everybody hyper aware of creating an archive, creating a document, creating a sort of time and place. But at the same time, I mean, I was reading this morning a queer theorist, Jose Munoz, and he talks about sort of futurity and queerness as being also a utopia, as being a vision, as being you know, so it's also about picturing a community and picturing a zeitgeist or a thing that we're not, it's not so normal, it's not so rigid in a way. So using the constraints in the history of photography, but using a different kind of content and bringing it into a different vision.
I was asking you about the colour work.
Oh, the color work, yeah.
Very good answer. Great answer.
Well, I had to get Jose Munoz in there. Douglas Crimp, I was hired to photograph Douglas Crimp one time. So, but that's another issue. That was fun. So that's where the commission and the person actually came together, and it was like, thank you. The color work, so there's Cibachrome, that was more in the 90s, and that is more shooting from the hip. Also, so if I was in the nightclubs at night, I was with the Cibachrome during the day.
So it's street work.
Not street, still friends and interiors, but I was just really influenced by Nan Goldman, let's just say it. That's not that deep. I mean, a lot of us were. You know, it was sort of the thing, right, at that time. It still is. The kid I teach now, and they all love it. But So I do have Secret Chrome. I haven't presented it too much. There was one show at PS 122 Gallery in the 90s. It would be fun to look at that again. Justine Curlin keeps wanting me to do something with it. She keeps telling me we gotta get that work out. But so maybe next year.
Justine's in the corridor, isn't she? She's
Yeah,
she's an
Justine's
artist as well.
the nude with the pregnancy and the cape. So that's an example. So her sister is a stylist and had a vintage clothing store on Ludlow Street. I live on Ludlow Street, and her mother. And so Justine is a great photographer. Anyway, but the sister came in with some wardrobe. So that's how the cape came about, and the boots to Hannah. Hannah did that. So occasionally we have a little help from our friends.
It's a collaboration again, right?
Again, it's just whoever's feeling it at that moment, they come in. There's a little bit of commerce. We sell some, but when I give a cut to the person in the picture, which is also part of, I don't know. Again, it's an understanding of the collaboration, that it's also just a feminist ethic. Yeah.
Do you remember being a child and the evolution of your own creative interior?
I do remember being a child, but I don't know. I started taking pictures when I was 15, 16, and I made a darkroom in the attic of my house. So I do know right from the beginning I had a sense that I loved to do it, and I just would go up and mosh around and do what I do. But as far as understanding myself as a photographer, that took moving to New York to really kind of claim that space or that discipline. But as far as
Pre-discipline,
yeah.
pre-influence.
Do you?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay, so well, tell me about it.
Oh no. Well, that sense of enormous sense of peace and the I don't think I can find words on the spot like that. But I
Art
would
as
have been
being a place of solace or an interior spot. Yeah.
delight and solace
Yeah.
and retreat. Yeah.
And do you draw or paint? Or?
I was then, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I don't know that I wouldn't have claimed it, but because I come from a place where it wasn't a thing to be an artist. I mean, that wasn't the schooling, it wasn't important. So I don't think it was in the vocabulary for the family. We didn't have anybody in our family that did that. But I think I just knew also what you're describing as like a refuge, as a place that you could find another kind of identity or self, that you could secretly kind of do something that, like for me, it was that secret dark room in the attic that nobody came to, nobody bothered, nobody cared, nobody asked, but it was there. I could do it. And yeah.
Any final questions? Anybody?
Any plans for another book?
No, so well, there's like hundreds of these. Do you know that?
How many?
A lot. Well, maybe 150.
Wow.
Because we published a book in 2009.
Oh yeah, there's a little book. It's got 28 plates, and it's from 2009. John did it in London, and it's only 500 copies, and that's very sweet. Yeah, and so we love that book. We should do another one, Matt, you're right. It's probably at least, there's another book of this, but then Justine wants to do something with the 90s stuff. I just work here, John. If somebody has a good idea, we'll go with it. We'll go with it.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks for
It's been a
having me.
really
Thanks for coming
illuminating
out.
talk.
Did you forget anything?
Probably, yeah. But it's okay.
Well, we'll be here, we can always
Yeah.
chat, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Does anybody, no?
Yeah, we're good.
We'll talk, yeah, we'll
Yeah,
talk
great.
to you afterwards.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.